What's up guys, LiftingNerdBro here. There's a lot of builds for Path of Exile, but I kind of feel like we could use some more builds that are suited for new players or people who doesn't have a lot of currency yet. So because of that I decided to make a Fireball Witch build. This build will only cost you 10 to 20 cares depending on how lucky you are. And trust me guys, that is not a lot of currency from level 1 to 80 or 75 depending on what you prefer. The strength of this build lies in having a good amount of damage, a good amount of AoE damage and a good amount of single target damage. I originally designed this build for the 1 month hardcore race, so it also has a very good amount of survivability, and the way we obtain that survivability is by using Eldritch Battery and auras together, like Discipline and Clarity, to reach a really high mana regeneration rate. And because of this high mana regeneration rate, we're able to run Arctic armor at a really high level. At the moment I have around 260 mana regeneration per second, which will allow me to go to level my Arctic armor to level 22 as far as I remember. And trust me guys, that is a lot. At level 18, which it is right now, well, physical damage is not much of a threat to me, to be honest, and it's a lot of fun. I've never thought that I could have so much fun with this kind of setup. Anyway, let's take a look at how the build is put together. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys a little about how Fireball actually works, but let me just get my auras up. We're gonna put on Purifier, Discipline, and Clarity, but I'm gonna explain these later. The way Fireball works is that it has two ways of dealing damage, and the first one is the initial hit, the projectile damage. The second one is the explosion that occurs after the projectile hits. And with that kind of knowledge we can kind of figure out what kind of skill gems that would suit our Fireball. And for that purpose I have linked Fireball with Concentrated Effect. Concentrated Effect will give you a huge damage boost, simply because it will increase the explosion damage of Fireball, the AoE damage of Fireball, by, in this case, 66% more area damage. This area damage can further be amplified by using skills such as Blast Radius, as you can see, increased radius of area skills and more area damage, and skills such as Amplify, but we're gonna get into the skill tree later. Fireball is also linked with Spell Echo, as you can see with when I'm clicking once, two of the spells, two casts are being made, and it's being cast faster than we normally would be able to. It's linked with Fire Penetration as well, and this basically means that, well, to put it simply, Fireball will do more damage with Fire Penetration. The last one is Greater Multiple Projectiles, and you won't be able to use Greater Multiple Projectiles in the beginning if you're starting out with a new character. You will, however, get lesser multiple projectiles when you reach Act 2, and excuse me, I've been drinking way too many energy drinks. I can't handle it. But yeah, you can get lesser multiple projectiles. The reason you're using greater multiple projectiles or lesser multiple projectiles is that Fireball is one of those skills that are able to shotgun enemies. Let's see if we can find an enemy here so I can demonstrate it. So we can shoot this volley, and it hits a lot of monsters. Let's see if can we clear these small ones. Okay, now this guy, if we hit him right, we'll be able to hit him with more than one fireball at a time. As you can see, 2 fireballs are flying by. That means we're hitting him with, see how many is this? We're hitting him with at least 3 to 4 projectiles at a time. And since all of these projectiles does explosion damage, they will also all of them do AoE damage. So you can do some really high damage to single targets by shotgunning them. And the best way to do that is If you put the mouse cursor here, you'll see it spreads out. But if you put it over here, it will shoot out in a straight cone. So try to see if you can hit your enemies like that. Anyway, that was the side information. It doesn't have too much to do with the build. We are also using, and this is probably this is the bread and butter of the build. We're using Arctic Armor. Arctic Armor is a skill that works by reducing physical damage taken when getting hit, and also fire damage taken when getting hit. And as you can see, my Arctic Armor is now level 16 plus 2 levels, because my shield gives 2 plus levels to cold gems, and I would recommend you guys finding that some of that or shield like that as well. They are fairly cheap, but Arctic Armor will simply nullify 55 physical damage and fire damage, and that is actually really powerful. When I'm running around in level 74 maps at the moment, only the really hard-hitting mobs are able to like penetrate my vagina. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Sorry, guys. That was immature. I apologize. No, penetrate my shield. We can call it that. Anyway, and that basically means that physical damage is not really much of a problem, to be honest. And I will be able to level Arctic Armor even higher when, well, when it gets enough experience. I haven't reached that part yet. But with the current mana that I have now, the current mana regeneration and the current mana regeneration you guys will have if you follow this build as well, at around level 75 you will have, perhaps not this exact number, this of course depends on your gear as well, but I have 260 right now, and if I look up how Arctic Armor, how much mana it drains, I will actually be able to level my Arctic Armor up until, I think it's 23 or 24. I may be wrong on this, but it's in that ball yard. I keep talking about mana regeneration rate, but perhaps I should tell you guys why it is so important. And the reason for that is that Arctic Armor, as you can see when I hold over the tooltip here, when we're standing still, Arctic Armor will drain 35.3 mana per second, and an additional 176 mana drain per second while we're moving. So if we're moving around, you have to add the 35 to 176, and that's around 210. My math is not too good, sorry about that. And if you don't have enough mana regeneration rate, you will simply run out of mana. If I turn off clarity, I can do that. When I run around now, you can see my mana is being drained, and that's because Arctic Armor drains more mana than I am regenerating. If I turn on my clarity again,
I need more mana.
Oh, that's not what I want to. Turn on clarity, and let's put on our discipline, because the discipline, I'm gonna explain that as well, how that influences. As you can see, now my mana regeneration rate is sufficient to sustain Arctic Armor. And the way that we are able to reach this really high mana regeneration per second is through a really cool skill node up here called Eldritch Battery. And it converts all energy shield to mana. So that basically means that all the energy shield you're getting from your gear, it will be converted into mana. That can leave you with a really high mana pool. And if that wasn't enough, this aura here, Discipline, it gives us energy shield, that's what I'm trying to say. And this will be converted to mana as well. So if I turn off my Discipline aura, let's take a look at my mana regeneration rate, because the total mana is now 2,309. If I turn on my Discipline, we now have 3,349, and as you can see, my mana regeneration went up by quite a margin. And that's also the reason why we're choosing aura nodes, because the aura nodes here will increase the effectiveness of our discipline and clarity, and of course our purity of fire as well. But it basically gives us more mana regeneration rate, and that is why we're able to reach this fairly big amount of mana regeneration, and therefore being able to sustain Arctic armor. I'm sorry, I promise I won't talk about Arctic armor again. I probably will, but I'll try not to. Anyway, now that we've beaten that horse to death, let's talk about some of the other skills that we're utilizing in this build. And one of them is Lightning Warp. One of the cool things about Lightning Warp and the combination of Arctic armor, sorry, yes, I said Arctic armor again, is that, as you can see, we've been drained 176 additional mana when we're moving. But if we're using Lightning Warp, that's not gonna happen. It will only count as if we're standing still and only drain 35. And I've linked Lightning Warp with reduced duration and faster casting. And that will give you the quickest way of using Lightning Warp. And up here you can see this is the auras that we're using. We're using Clarity, Discipline, and Purity of Fire. And I've linked that with reduced mana, and that basically just means that the auras will reserve less mana. So it's fairly simple. It means that we will have more mana to use as we please because it reduces less. No need to explain that further. As with the Arctic armor over here, I didn't talk about what you could link it with. There's not really too much you can link Arctic armor with at the moment that makes too much sense, except for Empower, and I would recommend you guys do that if you have the currency to do that and the patience to level Empower. And it's also a really good idea to put Arctic armor in a 2+ level of cold gems, like this item, because it will, you can see, it will add 2 levels to Arctic armor. Okay guys, so I've just run over here because I need to show you how this link works. It's much easier to show than to explain. But basically this is a spell totem which is linked with faster casting, summon skeletons, and blind. And the purpose of this skill is, let's see if we can find some monsters here. Where are you? We don't want these. It's just typical monsters, and I have to open the chest. I do have to open the chest. Okay, so we have some monsters here. You may have realized that Fireball is a range skill, and Fireball works best if you have monsters at somewhat mid to close range, but you don't want them all up in your face. So we're gonna throw down this spell totem that will summon skeletons, and as you can see, they will kind of aggro the monsters up here, and that means that we can blast the zombies in this case from afar. And it also works really well in situations where you have this door opening and you can put the spell totem here, and it will summon skeletons in here if there's monsters, and the totem will be relatively safe because you don't want to throw the totem into the middle of that. Well, these zombies aren't too smart, but normally the totem will get attacked and it will get destroyed. But it is a really nice way of creating a decoy instead of tanking the monsters up front. You don't need to do this all the time. I'm actually rarely doing it, but for some monsters it's really nice to be able to keep them at bay. The last skill gem setup I want to talk about is our cast when damage taken setup. And I have linked cast when damage taken to Enduring Cry, Increased Duration, and Immortal Call. And all of these skills are level 9 except for Enduring Cry. And how this works is that if we're taking really high amounts of burst physical damage, or just damage for that matter, cast when damage taken will proc, we'll cast Enduring Cry, which will give us an endurance charge, and Immortal Call will proc. And depending on how many endurance charges we have, the Immortal Call duration will be 1 to 3 seconds in our case. Increased duration, of course, will increase the duration of Immortal Call. And this is really helpful for us because Arctic armor is, as I mentioned before, really helpful, and it blocks a lot of physical damage, but it is not too good against these really heavy hitting mobs. And this is where this setup comes in. And since we're now talking about defenses, I promise I'm going to make this short, but this is really important. Since we're now talking about defenses, it is very important for us to mention that a Granite Flask is one of our absolute most important items in this build. Because if you look at our estimated physical damage reduction, because since we have no armor, we only have Arctic armor, we have pretty much no physical damage reduction. But since we have chosen these flask effects, our granite flask is working like a boss. Let me show you. I'm gonna press this now. We're going from 3 to boom, 50% physical damage reduction. And if you're having, this is of course with 20%, and the nice thing about that is that it lasts for 4.8 seconds. And that is the reason that we're going for these flask effect nodes. They should not be underestimated, even though they are not as sexy as some other skill nodes are. So get yourself a granite flask, it will save your ass, and get it as soon as possible. Guys, I think it's time that we talk about the skill tree. And I'm gonna give you some pointers on how I leveled and an estimate of when I decided to pick Eldritch Battery and that kind of stuff. But the first thing you're going to do when you're leveling this character is to grab this mana regeneration node, so that you'll be able to spam your skills more. And then you're going for some damage here and some cast speed. Cast speed is really, really nice for Fireball. It feels really slow in the beginning, really boring, but when you get some cast speed, it starts to feel good. And you're gonna get Elemental Dominion. Even though I haven't picked it up here, you should do it. It's a mistake that I've made. And you're then gonna continue over here, go through this way, get some life, go for these flask nodes, get Deep Wisdom, and from Deep Wisdom we want to get Blast Radius. Blast Radius is one of those skill nodes that's going to make it a lot nicer for us to level again, because it will increase the radius of area skills and the damage of that. So basically Fireball will have a larger AoE and it will do more damage. When we have picked up Blast Radius, we're gonna go for this way. Grab this Strength node and grab these Life nodes. Don't go for the Aura nodes yet. We're gonna continue down here. We're gonna get Mental Acuity for the mana regeneration rate. And well, it's a nice bonus with the 30% increased critical strike chance. But that's not the reason we're picking it. We're mainly picking it for the mana regeneration rate, and because we can then pick these two really, really good life nodes. Don't pick this, it's not worth it. We're then gonna pick up some damage here, getting blaze and fire damage. And we're then going back to this area. We're gonna continue through this way, get the Firewalker skill here, get some more damage. Go this way, pick up some life, and then through this area. Don't pick the Aura nodes yet, that's not necessary. But if you feel a little squishy, you can pick the shield block and defense nodes here. And one of the reasons this is a pretty nice cluster is that not only will it give you more block chains, but it will also increase the defenses from our equipped shield, and both Phalanx and this node will do that. And that basically means that we'll get more energy shield from the shield that we're using. And you know what more energy shield means, guys? I don't have to say that again. I think we've beaten that horse. And we're gonna go for the life here. You're probably not elemental resistance capped yet, so elemental adaptation might not be the go-to skill node for you at that moment, but remember to pick it up when you are capped. It will make a pretty big difference. We're then going to move down towards the temple area, get the Celestial Walker, move down and get Prestigation. The 6% increased cast speed is really nice, and the mana regeneration is really nice. We're going for Amplify here. Again, this will increase the area damage and area radius for Fireball, so that's a really nice skill to get as well. At this point in time, you may want to consider if it's time to go for Eldritch Battery, and that really depends on what gear you having right now. If you don't have any energy shield, it wouldn't make too much sense to go for Eldritch Battery. But if you feel like you have a decent amount of energy shield and that you can survive without it, well, then go for it and see if you can sustain your Arctic armor at that point when you're using Eldritch Battery along with Clarity. You may not be able to use Discipline straight away. When you've done that, I decided to go for some more damage. I picked the elemental damage here and this really nice mana regeneration node. And as you may see the pattern, guys, we're going for mana regeneration, and that, as I said, yeah, I'm just saying this to make sure that you guys understand, is to make sure that we can run Arctic armor. When we've grabbed these nodes, let me see, what did I do? I think oh yeah, at that point when we have reached Eldritch Battery and gotten these nodes, it's time to get some aura nodes. The first aura nodes you want to get is these 3. Influence is a really strong aura node, and you can get it for only 3 points, and it will make your clarity and your discipline much more efficient, as well as your purity of fire, but it's not too good for that. And then you're gonna go for these nodes over here. Don't want to take reduced mana reservation because you're not going to need it. When you've done that, I would recommend going down this way, picking up the life and mana nodes here, getting Shaper for, again, you guessed it guys, 40% increased mana regeneration and 1% of life regenerated per second, and that is really nice. Having no life regeneration, well, that sucks. It just doesn't feel good when you're playing the game if you don't have any life regeneration. At least that's my opinion. You can do whatever you want, guys. You can also pick up this one if you want even more life regeneration. And as for the last few points, I feel like this build really shines when you reach 83, 85. And if since I'm level 75 now, I'm gonna show you which points I would choose if I gained 7 or 8 more levels on this character. I would of course finish this one, that's 1 point. We're getting some more life and mana. I would finish this cluster as well, get some more life. I would pick up Elemental Dominion, that's 3 points. I would probably have to pick up Alacrity as well. It's against my goodwill, but I need the dexterity and I can't find it on any gear right now. Maybe you have better luck than me, and this is now 4 points. But I would also pick up this really nice damage increase up here. So fire, 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 and that is 8 points. And that's probably how I would end this build. If you're going for level 90 or 95 and that kind of stuff, I would recommend you to start speccing into critical strike and that kind of stuff. Because at that point in time, you're probably gonna have a lot of currency to invest in the build as well. And with a lot of currency, you can make some really nice crit builds with this setup. But I'm not gonna cover that. But that is how I leveled and used this skill tree. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk to you about, guys, is the stat priority on your gear. We're gonna start with the defensive options that you have when you're browsing for gear and when you're finding gear. And you should always look for life on gear, you should look for energy shield, mana regeneration, intelligence, and maybe even a flat mana boost. And the least important thing you can look for is chaos resistance. Chaos resistance can be nice, but it's definitely not required. As for your offensive stats, you should try to aim for them in this priority. Get fire damage, elemental damage, spell damage. And the reason I'm mentioning spell damage below fire damage and elemental damage is because that spell damage does not affect burn damage. And while burn damage is not too important for our build, it's still a nice little boost that you can have. But you should of course always pick more spell damage, more total spell damage compared to if you have 12% increased fire damage versus 16% increased spell damage, then pick the spell damage. You should then go for something like cast speed and critical hit chains, and the last would be critical hit multiplier. If you're going for the really late game, I would suggest you switch it around and focus on getting a lot of critical hit chance and maybe even critical hit multiplier. That's pretty much it, guys. I think we're done. I think we covered most of it. We could, of course, always talk a little more about which unique items would go hand in hand with this build, but since it is a beginner's guide, I think we're gonna leave that out for now. If you want to know, you can always ask me in the forum thread or down below in the comments on YouTube. And you can even come ask me on my Twitch live stream as well. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and bros, do even nerd.